The Eternal Council had ruled the galaxy for 11 million years. 7 species sat on the council, and all 7 had conquered death itself. Some had changed their bodies into machines that never broke down. Others had learned to grow new bodies when old ones failed. A few had become beings of pure energy, impossible to kill by any weapon known to science. They called themselves the Eternals, and they believed they were gods. For 11 million years, they had watched younger species rise and fall. These younger races were born, lived their short lives, and died. The Eternals called them mortals and treated them like insects. What value could a creature have if it only lived for 100 years? What wisdom could it gain? What power could it hold? The answer, the Eternals decided, was simple. Mortals had value only as servants, as workers, as food. Every mortal species that entered council space faced the same choice: pay tribute or die. The tribute was always the same: 10% of their population every year, forever. These tributes would serve the eternal species in whatever way their masters desired. Some became laborers in mines that stretched across entire moons. Others became entertainment, forced to fight and die for immortal audiences, who found death amusing precisely because they would never experience it themselves. A few became food for the species that had evolved to consume living minds that no mortal race had ever refused. The Ketheri, proud warriors with scales like emeralds, had surrendered within a week of first contact. The Vorn Collective, a species of giants who stood 3 meters tall, had bent their knees and offered their children. The Silicates, beings of living crystal who could process information faster than any computer, had calculated the odds and chosen survival through submission. 11 million years. Thousands of species. Not one had ever said no. Then humanity arrived. The colony ship. USS Endeavour had traveled for 200 years through the void between stars. Its crew had been born in space, had children in space, and expected to die in space. They were the 7th generation to live aboard the great vessel, and they carried with them the hopes of a small blue planet called Earth. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge when the alarms began to sound. She was 43 years old, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that had seen too many problems to panic at one more. She had commanded the Endeavour for 12 years, guiding it through asteroid fields and solar storms and a dozen other dangers that would have killed a lesser crew, but she had never seen anything like the ship that appeared before them. It was enormous. The Endeavour was the largest vessel humanity had ever built. A cylinder 10 kilometers long that held 50,000 souls. The alien ship was bigger, much bigger. It hung in space like a moon made of gold and crystal, and it made no attempt to hide its power. A light filled the bridge. When it faded, something stood in the center of the room. Ambassador Velthrix was beautiful in the way that a storm is beautiful, or a volcano, or any other force of nature that could kill without effort. His body was made of living crystal, constantly shifting and reforming into new patterns. He had no face, but somehow Captain Vasquez knew he was looking at her. "I am Velthrix of the Eternal Council," the creature said. His voice came from everywhere at once. "Your species has entered our space. You will hear our terms." Vasquez straightened her shoulders. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Endeavour. We come in peace. We're explorers looking for silence." The word hit her like a physical force. Around her, crew members stumbled. Some fell to their knees. Vasquez stayed standing, but only barely. "Your intentions do not matter," Velthrix continued. "Your desires do not matter. Your hopes and dreams and aspirations do not matter. You are mortal. You are brief. You are nothing. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 11 million years, and we will rule it for 11 million more. You exist only because we allow it." He moved closer. The crystal of his body chimed like bells with each step. "Here are your terms. You will provide tribute to the Council, 10% of your population each year to serve as we see fit. You will expand no further without permission. You will develop no weapons. You will accept Council observers in all your systems. You will obey, or you will be destroyed." Vasquez's heart pounded in her chest. She thought of Earth, so far behind them. She thought of the other colony ships, spreading out through the stars. She thought of her daughter, only 6 years old, sleeping in the family quarters 3 decks below. "And if we refuse?" she asked. Velfrix made a sound that might have been laughter. "No mortal species has ever refused. But if you did, we would find your homeworld. We would burn it to ash. We would hunt down every ship, every station, every outpost. We would erase you so completely that in 1,000 years, no one would remember you ever existed. This is not a threat. This is simply what would happen. We have done it before. We will do it again." The bridge was silent. Vasquez could hear her own breathing, fast and shallow. She could hear the quiet sobs of her communications officer. She could hear the hum of the ship's engines, still pushing them forward into this nightmare. She thought about surrender. She thought about what it would mean to hand over 10% of humanity, year after year, forever. She thought about children torn from their parents. She thought about people worked to death in alien mines, or forced to fight for entertainment, or consumed by things that saw them as nothing more than food. And then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had made a decision and would live with the consequences, whatever they might be. It was the smile of someone who had looked into the abyss and decided to spit in its eye. "We need time," she said. "Time to contact our homeworld. Time to discuss your terms with our leaders. Give us 1 standard year." Velthrix studied her with senses she could not understand. 1 year is nothing. You may have it. But know this, mortal. When the year ends, you will submit. Every species submits. It is the natural order of the universe. The light returned, brighter than before. When it faded, the ambassador was gone. Captain Vasquez stood alone on her bridge, surrounded by her terrified crew. She turned to her first officer, a young man named Chun, who looked like he might be sick. "Send a message to Earth," she said. "Priority 1. Tell them everything. What do we tell them to do?" Chun asked. Vasquez looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an empire of immortals waited for humanity to kneel. They had waited 11 million years for someone to stand up to them. They were about to stop waiting. "Tell them," she said quietly, "to get ready." The Eternal Council had never truly fought a war. They had crushed rebellions, yes. They had destroyed species that annoyed them. They had even battled each other in slow, careful conflicts that lasted thousands of years and ended in negotiated settlements. But they had never faced an enemy that fought the way the Mortalkind, Compact, fought. The first battle took place in the Ketheri home system. The Council sent a fleet of 500 ships, more than enough to destroy any mortal force. They expected a quick victory, a brutal reminder of immortal power that would break the rebellion before it could truly begin. The Compact fleet met them with only 200 ships. Admiral Yuki Tanaka, the human commander, ordered her forces to retreat almost immediately. The Council fleet gave chase, confident in their superior numbers. They pursued the fleeing mortals through an asteroid field, around a gas giant, past a dying star. They did not notice the mines until it was too late. The Ketheri had spent 6,000 years mapping every rock in their home system. They knew paths through the asteroids that no outsider could follow. They had hidden explosive devices in places no scan could detect. And they had taught the humans exactly where to lead their enemies. 300 council ships died in the first hour. The survivors retreated in confusion, leaving the system in mortal hands. It was the first time in 11 million years that the council had lost a battle. It would not be the last. The war spread across the galaxy, like fire through dry grass. The Compact could not match the council's resources or technology, but they had something more valuable: speed. Mortal commanders made decisions in minutes that took immortal admirals centuries to consider. Mortal scientists developed new weapons between battles, sometimes between engagements on the same day. General Marcus Webb became famous for a tactic the council called impossible. He would send small groups of ships on suicide missions, drawing enemy forces out of position. While the Immortals focused on crushing these sacrificial units, the main Compact fleet would strike from unexpected angles. By the time the Council realized what was happening, they had already lost. Webb lost ships. He lost soldiers. He lost friends. But he won battles, and in war, that was what mattered. "They don't understand us," he explained to a reporter who managed to reach the front lines. "They see a human ship flying straight at their weapons, and they think we're stupid or crazy. They don't understand that the pilot knows she's going to die, and she's chosen to die anyway because her death will save 10,000 others. That's not insanity. That's love. And they've forgotten what love means." The Cathari provided something equally valuable: hatred. 6,000 years of suffering had turned them into the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. They did not fight to win. They fought to hurt. Every Cathari soldier carried the names of ancestors lost to tribute, and they whispered those names as they charged into battle. An immortal general named Tavax once captured a Cathari strike team. He tortured them for information, confident that pain would break their will as it had broken so many others before. They laughed at him. "You cannot hurt us," their leader said through broken teeth and shattered scales. "We were born hurting. We have lived our entire lives hurting. Pain is our oldest friend. But you, immortal, you have forgotten what pain feels like. When we kill you, and we will kill you, you will finally remember." Tavax executed them all, but he never forgot the look in their eyes, and he never stopped fearing it. The Vorn Collective brought strength that defied belief. Centuries of forced labor had made them tough beyond measure. A Vorn Marine could survive wounds that would kill any other species. They could fight for days without rest, weeks without food, months without hope. The Council had thought they were breaking the Vorn by working them to exhaustion. Instead, they had created soldiers who could not be exhausted. The Silicates contributed something more subtle but equally deadly: information. Their minds processed data faster than any computer, and they had spent 100,000 years secretly mapping Council weaknesses. They knew where the Immortals stored their supplies. They knew which commanders hated each other. They knew the secret routes between systems that the Council thought nobody else had discovered. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every crack in the Immortal Empire, the Silicates remembered all of it. And now they shared it with their allies. The war lasted 30 years by human reckoning. To the Immortals, it passed in an eye blink. They kept expecting the mortals to grow tired, to give up, to accept the natural order of the universe. Instead, the Compact only grew stronger. New generations joined the fight. Children who had been born after the war started became soldiers, then officers, then admirals. A human named James Vesquez, grandson of the captain who had started it all, led the assault on the Council's third largest shipyard. He was 22 years old. His opposite number, the Immortal Defender, was 7 million years old. James won. How? The defeated Immortal asked as Compact soldiers secured the station. "You are children. You know nothing. You have seen nothing. How can you possibly defeat us?" James looked at the ancient being with something like pity. "Because you have all the time in the universe," he said, "so nothing matters to you. But we only have moments. Every second of our lives is precious. Every decision is urgent. We cannot afford to waste time on fear or doubt or hesitation. We act because we must, because tomorrow we might be dead. That makes us faster than you, braver than you, more alive than you have been in millions of years." He turned away. "You stop living the moment you stop dying. And an army of the living will always defeat an army of the dead." The immortal had no answer. The war continued, and the mortals kept winning. Not every battle, not easily, but steadily, inevitably, unstoppably. The council began to fear Dot, and fear they were about to learn was only the beginning. The year passed slowly for the Eternal Council and quickly for everyone else. Ambassador Velthrix spent those 12 months in quiet confidence. He had delivered the same ultimatum to hundreds of species over his long existence, and every single one had responded the same way. First came denial, then anger, then bargaining, then despair, and finally acceptance. Mortals were predictable that way. Their brief lives made them desperate to survive, and desperation always led to surrender. The Council's spies watched human space and reported nothing unusual. The mortals had gone quiet. Their colony ships had stopped moving. Their communications had dropped to almost nothing. The spies assumed humanity was paralyzed by fear, spending its final 3 months arguing about how to submit most gracefully. Velthrix smiled his crystal smile and waited. What he did not know, what no spy could have discovered, was that humanity had spent the year doing something no mortal species had ever attempted before. It started 3 days after the Endeavor's message reached Earth. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva, in a building that had once housed the United Nations. They watched the recording of Velthrix's ultimatum. They saw Captain Vasquez's face as she asked for time. And then they began to argue. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to run, to scatter humanity across the universe in hopes that some fragment might survive. The debates lasted for weeks, growing louder and more desperate. With each passing day, then a young diplomat from Nigeria named Amara Okonkwo stood up and said something that changed everything. "We are asking the wrong question," she said. "We keep asking what humanity should do. But we are not the only mortals in this galaxy. The Council has been taking tribute from other species for millions of years. Where are they? What do they want? And most importantly, what would they do if someone finally stood up to their masters?" The room went silent. Within a month, humanity had made contact with the Cathari. They were not hard to find. The Council did not hide its tribute species. Why would they? Mortals were property, nothing more. The Cathari lived on a dozen worlds near the edge of Council space. Their population carefully controlled, to provide exactly 10% each year without dying out. Entirely. The first human ambassador to reach them was a man named David Park. He landed his small ship on the Cathari homeworld, expecting to find broken creatures, slaves who had forgotten what freedom meant. Instead, he found Rage. The Cathari elder who met him was ancient by their standards, nearly 200 years old. Her scales had faded from bright emerald to pale jade, and her eyes held the weight of countless sorrows. Her name was Kethmara, and she had watched her children taken for tribute. She had watched her grandchildren taken. She had watched her great-grandchildren taken. "You want to fight the Eternals," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Park replied. "Good." The old warrior leaned forward. "We have been waiting for someone to say those words for 6,000 years. We will fight with you. We will die with you if we must." but we will never kneel again. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. The Vorn Collective, those gentle giants who had been forced to work in mines until their massive bodies broke. The Silicates, whose brilliant minds had been used to run council systems while their people were harvested for parts. The methane breathers of Proxima, who had lost 90% of their population to eternal experiments. The hive minds of the Outer Reach, who still remembered every single individual taken over 100,000 years. 17 species. Billions of beings. All of them had lived under the Council's boot for longer than humanity had existed. All of them said, yes, by the 6th month. The Alliance had a name, the Mortalkind Compact. By the 8th month, they had a combined fleet. By the 10th month, they had a plan, and then the year ended. Ambassador Velthrix materialized aboard his golden ship, ready to receive humanity's surrender. He expected groveling diplomats and cargo holds full of tribute slaves. He expected tears and begging and the sweet taste of another species broken to the Council's will. Instead, he found a transmission waiting for him on all frequencies. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared on his screens. She looked different now. The gray in her hair had spread, and new lines marked her face. She wore a uniform he did not recognize, black with silver stars on the collar. Behind her stood representatives of every tribute species in the galaxy, their faces hard with determination. Ambassador Velthrix, she said. 1 year ago, you demanded tribute from humanity. You gave us a choice between slavery and extinction. Today, we give you our answer. The view shifted to show a fleet. Ships of every design filled the screen. Human vessels flying alongside Kethari warships, Vorn destroyers, silicate carriers. Thousands of ships. Millions of soldiers. An army of mortals who had decided they would rather die free than live as slaves. For 11 million years, you have told the galaxy that mortality is weakness, Vasquez continued. You were wrong. Mortality is urgency. Every mortal species you conquered learned something you never could, how to fight like every moment matters. Because for us, it does. Velthrix felt something he had not experienced in eons. It took him a moment to recognize it. Fear. You taught the Kethari how to hate, Vasquez said. You taught the Vorn how to endure. You taught the Silicates how to plan revenge across generations. And you taught humanity that we have nothing to lose by fighting, because submission means losing everything anyway. The transmission showed Vasquez standing straight, her eyes bright with cold fire. We do not pay tribute, Ambassador. We collect debts, and you owe the mortal species of this galaxy 11 million years of blood and suffering. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quiet but carried across the void like thunder. We are coming for you, all of you, not for conquest, not for power, not for revenge, though you have earned it 1,000 times over. We are coming because the galaxy deserves to be free, because no species, mortal or immortal, should ever have to kneel before another. The screen went dark. Velthrix stood in the silence of his ancient ship, surrounded by the power of 11 million years, and felt the universe shift beneath him. Somewhere in the distance, mortal engines roared to life. The war had begun. The turning point came at Velketh Prime. For 30 years, the Mortalkind Compact had won battles, but not the war. They had taken systems-free tribute worlds, destroyed countless enemy ships. But the Eternal Council still existed. The 7 immortal species still ruled from their ancient thrones. And as long as they survived, they would eventually rebuild. They had time. They'd always had time. The mortals needed a way to kill the unkillable. Dr. Sarah Chun was 91 years old when she finally solved the problem. She had spent her entire adult life working on it, ever since watching the first transmission from Captain Vasquez as a young physics student. 60 years of research, failure, more failure. Her hair had turned white. Her hands shook with age. But her mind remained sharp, and her determination never wavered. The immortals are not truly immortal, she explained to the Compact's War Council. They have simply learned to cheat death in various ways. The crystal beings regenerate from any damage. The energy creatures cannot be destroyed by physical weapons. The machine intelligences copy themselves endlessly. But they all share one weakness. They exist. And anything that exists can be made to not exist. She showed them her creation. She called it the terminus field. The science was beyond most of them, involving concepts like quantum reality anchoring and existential negation. But the effect was simple. The terminus field collapsed reality itself in a small area, unmade the very fabric of existence. Anything caught inside did not die. It simply stopped being. No regeneration, no copying, no escape. The first test was conducted on a captured Council scout ship, crewed by the crystal beings called the Velthrix, the same species that Ambassador Velthrix belonged to. The terminus field activated for exactly 3 seconds. When it ended, the ship was empty. Not destroyed, empty. The crew had been erased so completely that even their past seemed uncertain. Recording devices showed them existing one moment and not existing the next. No corpses, no debris, nothing. For the first time in their 11-million-year history, the Velthrix could die. The Compact built the terminus field into everything. Missiles, mines, ship-mounted, weapons, personal devices carried by assault teams. They built them in secret, hiding the technology even from their own forces until the right moment. The Battle of Velkith Prime was that moment. The Council had gathered its remaining forces to defend its most sacred world. Velkith Prime was where the 7 immortal species had first met 11 million years ago. It was where they had forged their alliance. It was the heart of their civilization, protected by defenses that had never been breached. Fleet Admiral Elena Vasquez commanded the attack. She was old now, past 100, kept alive by medicine that could not stop aging but could slow it. Her body was failing, but her mind was clear. She knew this would be her last battle. She intended to make it count. All ships, she said, her voice steady despite everything. Begin the operation. The Compact fleet numbered 10,000 vessels. The Council defense fleet numbered twice that. By any normal calculation, the attack should have failed. But the mortals were not attacking to win. They were attacking to get close enough. The first wave of Compact ships died within minutes. The second wave lasted longer, but still fell. The third wave, the fourth wave, the fifth wave, all of them broke against the Council defenses like water against stone. Immortal commanders began to relax. The mortals were throwing their lives away for nothing. Then the sixth wave reached the defensive perimeter. Every ship in the sixth wave carried a terminus device. As they died, they activated the weapons. Reality collapsed in 1,000 places at once. Council ships vanished. Space stations disappeared. Defense platforms stopped existing. And in the heart of the formation, the ruling council of 3 immortal species simply ceased to be. The Velthrix went first. The crystal beings who had demanded tribute from humanity, who had watched mortals suffer for millions of years, who had believed themselves eternal and untouchable. They learned the truth in a single terrible instant. They were not gods. They were just old. And old things could end. The Void Singers followed. These were creatures of pure darkness, beings who had evolved in the space between stars. They had consumed entire civilizations, drunk the light from suns, considered themselves the final predators of the universe. The terminus field taught them that even the darkness could be unmade. The Mind Collective died last. a species of linked psychic beings. They tried to scatter themselves across the galaxy when they felt their kin dying. But the terminus weapons were everywhere, and there was nowhere to run. Billions of linked minds screamed in unison as they felt themselves being erased from existence. The battle ended in less than 6 hours. When the light faded and the readings cleared, Admiral Vasquez looked out at what remained. 3 of the 7 eternal species were gone. Not defeated, not conquered, gone, extinct, erased so completely that the universe itself seemed uncertain they had ever existed. The remaining 4 council species responded in different ways. The machine eternal. Cold intelligences that had replaced their original bodies with metal long ago immediately surrendered. They were logical beings, and the logic was clear. They could not win. Further resistance meant extinction. The Thoughtweavers, psychic parasites who had fed on mortal minds for eons, tried to flee. Compact forces hunted them across 3 systems before accepting their surrender. The Overmind, a vast psychic entity composed of billions of merged consciousnesses, simply shattered. The shock of discovering it could die broke something fundamental in its being. It scattered into fragments, mad and weeping. No longer a threat to anyone. And the Velthrix, the few who had survived by being far from Velketh Prime, retreated to their home dimension and sealed the passage behind them. They would never be seen in normal space again. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by exhausted officers and flickering screens. She was crying, though she was not sure why. Joy, perhaps, or grief, or simply the release of a tension that had lasted her entire adult life. "It's over," someone whispered. "No," Vasquez replied. She turned to face her crew, these mortals who had done the impossible. "It's not over. It's just beginning. We didn't fight this war to become what they were. We fought to make something better." She looked out at the stars. "Now we have to build it." 3 months later, Admiral Elena Vasquez died in her sleep. She was 103 years old. The galaxy mourned her for a week. Then, as she would have wanted, they got back to work. 100 years after the Battle of Velketh Prime, the galaxy had become something new. The Mortalkind Compact had transformed into the Galactic Federation, a union of species bound not by force, but by choice. Membership was open to anyone who accepted the founding principles. No species would rule another. Number being would be owned by another, and every life, however brief, had value. The former tribute species took their place as full members. The Cathari, once harvested for their beautiful scales, now served as the Federation's diplomats, their ancient anger slowly cooling into firm determination. The Vorn, whose strength had been exploited in mines and construction sites, became the protectors of the weak, using their unbreakable bodies to shield others from harm. The Silicates, their brilliant minds finally free, pushed the boundaries of science in ways the immortals had never imagined. And humanity, the young species that had dared to say no, found itself at the center of something wonderful. They had not planned it that way. In the early years after the war, humans had tried to step back to let the older species lead. But something kept pulling them forward. Other species looked to humanity for guidance, for inspiration, for the spark of defiance that had lit the fire of revolution. A Cathari philosopher named Veltom wrote about it in his famous work, The Mortal Flame. Humanity did not defeat the Eternals because they were stronger or smarter or more numerous, he wrote. They won because they truly understood something the rest of us had forgotten. That limitation creates meaning. A life without end has no urgency. A species that cannot die has no reason to truly live. Humanity reminded us what it means to burn briefly, but brilliantly, and in doing so, they set the entire galaxy ablaze. The remaining immortal species adapted in different ways. the Machine Eternal integrated into Federation society, their cold logic slowly warming as they learned to appreciate mortal perspectives. They became the keepers of history, their perfect memories preserving the stories of species that have lived and died and lived again in the memories of others. The Thought Weavers, stripped of their power to feed on minds, found a new purpose as healers. Their psychic abilities, once used to consume, now helped repair damaged minds and ease suffering. It was not enough to make up for their crimes, but it was a beginning. The scattered fragments of the Overmind slowly, over centuries, began to reconnect. Not into the vast tyrannical consciousness they had once been, but into something gentler. They became guides and counselors, their ancient wisdom available to anyone who asked, their power limited by choice rather than force. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, a monument rose above the streets. It was not tall or grand, just a simple stone pillar with words carved in 1,000 languages. The inscription read, "We have only moments. That is why we matter." Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it. Some were old species who remembered the war. Others were young ones, born into freedom and curious about how it had been won. All of them stood before the monument and thought about what it meant. A young Kethari diplomat named Kethil visited the monument during her first assignment to Earth. She had grown up hearing stories of the war, of the heroes who had fought and died, of the moment when mortals had finally risen against their eternal masters. But standing before the simple stone, she felt something she had not expected. She felt confused. Kethil requested a meeting with the oldest human she could find, someone who had actually lived through the war. After weeks of searching, she was directed to a small house in the mountains of what had once been called Nepal. The woman who lived there was named Maya Vasquez. She was 112 years old, the great-great-granddaughter of Captain Elena Vasquez. She had been a child during the Battle of Velkith Prime, had grown up in the chaos of the post-war years, had spent her life trying to understand what her ancestor had started. "I don't understand," Kethil admitted, sitting across from the ancient human in a small room filled with books and memories. "Your species had no experience with the Council. You had never suffered under their rule. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Why did you fight? Why did you risk extinction for species you had never met?" Maya smiled. It was a tired smile, worn smooth by years of being asked the same question. Do you know what my great-great-grandmother said when they asked her that same question? Maya replied. She said that humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. Wars over land, wars over religion, wars over pride and greed, and 1,000 other foolish things. When we finally reached the stars, she thought we might leave all that behind. But then we met the Council, and she realized something. Maya leaned forward. She realized that all those wars had been practice. All that suffering, all that death, all that senseless violence. It had been preparing us for the only war that really mattered. A war not against each other, but for each other. For all of us. For the idea that every being deserves to be free. Kethil was silent for a long moment. "But you could have lost," she finally said. "You nearly did lose. Millions of your people died." "Yes," Maya agreed. "And millions more would have died as slaves if we hadn't fought. That was the choice. Die fighting for freedom or live forever in chains. For humans, that isn't really a choice at all." She reached out and took Kethil's hand, her aged skin warm against the young Kethari's cool scales. "We fight because we have to die," Maya said. "Every moment we have is borrowed. Every breath is a gift. And when you truly understand that, when you feel it in your bones, you cannot stand by and watch others suffer. Because their moments are just as precious as yours. Their lives are just as brief. And if we don't protect each other, who will? Kethel left the mountain house with tears in her eyes and a new understanding in her heart. The galaxy continued to grow. New species were discovered, young civilizations just reaching for the stars. Each one was greeted not with demands for tribute, but with offers of friendship. Each one was told the story of how the universe had changed, of the mortals who had stood against gods and won. And each one was given the same message that humanity had carried since the very beginning. You are not alone. You are not weak. Your life matters, however brief it may be. And if anyone ever tries to tell you otherwise, we will stand beside you. Because that is what mortals do. We protect each other. We fight for each other. We die for each other. And in doing so, we make our moments eternal. 10,000 years later, when a new species stumbled into Federation space, terrified and alone, a human ambassador was there to meet them. "Welcome," she said, with a smile that had been passed down through generations. "You have nothing to fear. Let me tell you a story about what happens when the universe underestimates mortal beings." And in a small house on a small planet, beneath a simple monument that said, "We have only moments. That is why we matter," the story continued. It would never end.